Now, today marks 100 days of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. For those keeping up, that's 51 more than Liz Truss. Rishi said he should be judged on, quote, his first 1,000 days rather than his first 100 in office. Well, what could that look like? One MP who has an idea is John Penrose, who yesterday asked the Prime Minister this.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago the Prime Minister commissioned me to propose 30 ways to boost growth and make Britain the most competitive country in the world. So far we're underway with about half of them. But some of the most valuable, like reforming ponderous and expensive utilities regulators or building on our international lead in open banking, haven't moved at all. So will he meet with me to discuss how to channel our inner Nigel Lawsons and unblock the arteries of our economy with low-cost, pro-competition, supply-side reforms?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has a long track record in advocating for and implementing policies that increase our competitiveness and reform the supply side of our economy. His report was fantastic, and I look forward to meeting with him to discuss them further and help drive growth in this country.
Well, a very interesting point there. The Prime Minister agreeing to meet with John Penrose and look at implementing the rest of those supply-side reforms. Well, what are they? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by John Penrose himself, live from Westminster. And John, first of all, why do you think it is that not all of your recommendations have so far been implemented?
Well, I think it's fairly simple, actually. It was simply that when Rishi commissioned me to do this 2 years ago, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was then Chancellor for about the next year, and we made some decent progress, as you just heard me saying in the chamber yesterday. But then, of course, we had a bit of a pause last summer, and he wasn't in government, and therefore things sort of lost momentum. So we've got to get back on track. We've got to re-inject that energy that we had.
And what are examples of these things that haven't yet been implemented? That I suppose the big point about these 30 reforms is that they're all sort of politically possible. What's top of the list?
Well, for me at least, the two I mentioned in the chamber in that clip you just played are really, really valuable. One is to reform some of the energy of the utility regulators, just because our utility sector, not just energy but others too, telecoms and water in particular, are moving pretty slowly. They're very heavily burdened by lots and lots of red tape. It means they can't be very customer focused, and the prices that we're all paying as a result are higher than they need to be, even after you've allowed for people like Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. And the other thing is, there's this bit of our economy called open banking, which is a huge international success. Not many people know about it, but it's an enormous success, and it's kind of an industry of the future. And if we can roll that out to apply across lots of other sectors too, repeat the trick that we've already done in banking, in things like energy, in retailing, in water, elsewhere, then we can have that kind of forward-looking international lead in lots of other industries of the future too.
What do you say to those who say that this has been a government that's been not that enthusiastic about the supply-side reform agenda? The previous Prime Minister listed at least 10 areas of supply-side reform, from planning to childcare to migration to everything else that it was going to get on and do. It seems like not only the tax cuts have been thrown away by this government, but also those big areas of seismic supply-side reform.
You've been here for long.
Well, I was very, very reassured actually by Rishi Sunak's reply to me in Prime Minister's questions yesterday, where he said, yeah, he wants to get on with this, he wants to meet me, he wants to talk about how we can take it forward. And I think, to be fair, in his first 100 days, he's had to do an awful lot of firefighting just to steady the ship, just to settle things down, make sure that the financial markets got back to normal, that interest rates were not spiralling in the wrong direction. And that was priority number one when he took over. Now they've done that, and they've done it very successfully. Now we can get back onto the more longer-term things, which, as you rightly say, are absolutely essential. And I take comfort from the fact that he was the bloke who commissioned me to write this stuff in the first place. So he clearly believes in it, otherwise he wouldn't have asked me to do it in the first place.
Now, of course, at Prime Minister's questions yesterday, he agreed to meet with you to discuss this further. Do you yet have a date in your diary for when that meeting will be?
Not quite yet. I'm afraid these things don't work quite that fast. But we've already reached out, and we're in discussions with the diary folks. So I hope it won't be long.
That is very, very interesting. And just finally, before I let you go, what do you think is going to be the next sort of 100 days of this Prime Minister? How quickly do you think we're going to move from this sort of stabilising era that we seem to be in right now to the real sort of pro-growth era, the sort of reformist era? What are we going to see and how soon?
Well, I devoutly hope that we're going to move on to that really fast, not just because actually there isn't very much money for other kinds of growth promoting things. You can't do it at the moment through more government spending because there's just no spare cash lying around. So the kinds of reforms which I was asking the Prime Minister about yesterday, which don't cost the taxpayer very much but are really, really valuable and help jobs and growth and all those important things, those really are the sort of the main game, the main opportunity in town at the moment. So I hope he's going to get onto it fast. I mean, he's also said, and I think rightly, that he wants to make sure that he's dealing with his five key priorities which he set in his New Year speech, things like stopping the small boats, trying to reduce NHS waiting times, reducing inflation. All those matter too, but these are a way to get quite a lot of those things done. So I think they kind of all work together.
Well, John Penrose, thank you so much for joining us there live from Westminster, and I hope that the meeting with the Prime Minister, when it does come, goes very well.